Welcome to another episode of Speaking of Diversity and Inclusion here at Mayo Clinic. Why do we need inclusive leaders? Given our current context, given our social distancing, why is it important for us to think about and concentrate on these ideas around inclusive leadership? So what we know is that when we have ambiguity, our inclination is to fill that with stories, to make up things. And so what we need are leaders who can actually drive us to make more concrete and relational decisions, right? So when we think about these five concepts of inclusive leadership, that's what we want. We ultimately want to drive people towards our common goals and making sure that the needs of the patient come first. And so to do that, we're encouraging each one of you to think of yourself as an inclusive leader. And so as we go into this session, think about how it is that you can take these principles and apply them to the rest of your life and to your work. So let's begin. Some checks there, but we'll have those go away in just a second. So as most of you know, my name is Andre Cohen, and I am the program director for the Office of Diversity and Inclusion. And I've been here almost 2 years now. That's amazing. Time really flies. And so my counterpart, my partner today is JP Fan. And JP, can you introduce yourself and tell a little bit about your role? JP, you are muted. So if you can hit your space bar to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Hello, this is JP. I am Senior Instructional Designer. I have been with Mayo for over 13 years, working with workforce learning, doing some instructional design, online program, stuff like that. That's all.
Great, thank you. All right, so again, if you can keep yourself muted, that would be wonderful. And when you want to speak, just hit your space bar. It will unmute you, but then you can go back to being muted. So we will watch that because we know that people are at home. Many people are at home, and there are things that we can't control. I do think it's important to recognize the difference between working from home, which is what some of us do on a regular basis, but then being in a crisis and working, right? So right now we're in a crisis and we're working. And so being able to surround yourself in a working space is important, that we recognize those differences. And so I'm so glad you are all here. And I'm an extrovert, so my family is like really glad that you all are here with me too. So let's go ahead and go through the rest of our presentation. So we want to talk a lot about this concept of an inclusive leader. And so what JP and I have really tried to, we've tried to research a lot of things. We looked at not only our Mayo values, but what actually is happening out in the marketplace, and what is it that the world demands. And so what we've kind of come up with is that there are these 5 components of inclusive leadership, or these 5 skills that we'll share part of those today with you, and we'll do other parts with you as we continue. But these are 5 principles that you can use to become an effective leader. And so you can use this as a supervisor, you can use this as a hiring manager, you can use this as a good employee, right? So wherever you are, you can use these five principles to build this inclusive environment that we're really trying to strive for, because we recognize when we're all doing our best and we're all hitting all cylinders, that is when the needs of the patient are actually realized, right? So we know that they come first, but we also want to realize those. And so that's why we've come up with this inclusive leadership program. And again, thank you for joining. So here are the 5 aspects of inclusive leadership. And first is the inclusive mindset. Second is cultural competence and agility. And we'll talk about how those are different, because I'm sure folks that have been exposed to cultural competence, but we also want to talk about the agility of being culturally competent. Greater adaptability, it should be pretty obvious why we're looking at greater adaptability, being aware of unconscious bias, and finally, creating a sense of belonging. So how do we create a sense of belonging? And so the overall objectives are pretty clear, that by the end of this program, we are hoping that you'll be able to define what inclusive leadership is, that you'll describe the 5 qualities and traits with examples, right? So you can use those examples, and we have pragmatic ways of approaching those, identifying the difference between inclusive leaders and exclusive leaders, and applying some of the best practices to inclusive leadership. So when we talk about, before we even talk about inclusivity, I really want to talk about this idea of diversity. And with your annotation tool, and there's a lot of us in the room, so I recognize that this will be a little bit messy. But what I'd like for you to do is, under diversity, just type in ways in which these shapes are similar. What are some ways in which these shapes are similar? So if you can use your annotation tool and just type in how some of these shapes are similar, or you can use the chat room, right? So they have a blue color. They're relatively the same size. They're all shapes. They all have closed spaces. They're blue. They're outlined. They all have sides. Yep, they all have sides, right? They're self-contained. All right, great. What I'd like for you to do also, now that you have those there, what I want you to do in another color, so most of you use blue, you can use another color, and I want you to tell me how those things are different. How are those shapes different? So how are those shapes different? The sides are different. They have angles and corners. All right? The number of sides is different. I see someone in the chat room. What are they saying in the chat room, JP? Good. Angles and corners, names. All right. Right. So JP, I can't hear you.
Nobody types in. I do not see anything here.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So what we recognize is that diversity is the recognition of our commonalities and our differences. And so when we look at these shapes, they are very much different, but they're also very similar, right? And so they are very different and they are very similar. And so diversity is that recognition of both of those things. So what I'd like for you to do next, and this is going to be messy. So just so you know, it's going to be messy, and then I'll clear the slides. What I want you to do in this picture of these Dallas buildings is I want you to circle where you see these shapes showing up in this inclusion model, right? So in this picture, where do you see either forms of these shapes or inclusiveness of the shapes, and then just circle those on the screen. Wonderful. All right, you can stop right there. Can someone just, you all are very smart and intelligent, and I appreciate what your participation in this. Can someone tell me what is the difference between diversity and inclusion, or not even difference, or what is their relationship? Feel free to speak.
Oh, can we have people typing in the chat room, because on
Yep,
the
they can
screen
chat.
there's overlapping. I just couldn't read it.
Yep. So what are people's thoughts? You can type that in the
Agreeing to
chat room.
dance versus being asked to dance. Great. It's like a tango, but still dancing together.
Good.
Versus different people, inclusions using those different people's talents and skills. Great points.
Wonderful. All right,
Being
so I'm going
included.
to keep going, JP.
Yeah, being included and not excluded, differences coming together to make one.
All right. So each of those shapes find themselves in this inclusion model. This picture of buildings in Dallas, right? So this is so diversity is these commonalities and differences. Inclusion is being able to maximize those differences and commonalities. So we want to hear from Dr. Peter Kalina about the difference between diversity and inclusion. And some of you may have seen the video because we sent it out in a link prior to, but I'd like to just play that for us right now.
I couldn't hear it. Andre, can you hear? Can other people hear it? I couldn't.
I cannot hear it either.
All right,
Yeah.
one moment. One moment. So I will, so the video is here and it is playing. I can hear it. I'm not sure why you can't, but we'll just move on. So what Dr. Kalina is sharing here is that diversity, it's the difference between being invited to a party and then inclusion is being asked to dance. And I would say that the next step in that would be equity, which is, are we playing the music that allows people to dance, right? That encourages people's participation. And so when we simply think about diversity and inclusion, it really is as simple as, counting numbers versus having each person count, right? Unique differences, but seeking out those experiences to maximize our ability to work together. And again, the last part is receiving an invitation to the party versus being asked to dance. So why is it that we need inclusive leaders? And so in the chat room, I want you to answer that question. So type in the chat room, why do you think we need inclusive leaders? Why is that important?
Modeling behavior, staff engagement. Teamwork, team stronger, individual, okay, to get a good advantage of everyone's strength. Yes, to ensure mail is the best it can be,
Wonderful.
to harness good morals at the workplace, including leaders. An inclusive leader allows everyone to add to the pool of knowledge and to arrive at the best process. Leverage diverse talents and perspective is okay. We all have the unique, diverse staff. Super. Our job is to reach all of them, so they can share many different voices, expressions from others in one message.
All right. So, an inclusive leader is a leader in who creates a welcoming environment by acknowledging each individual's unique self and perspective and making everyone feel valued, accepted, and included. So that is how at Maya we are defining inclusive leaders. We know that there are many, many definitions that people go to, or ideologies or thought process that people go to, but this is how we're looking at inclusive leadership at Mayo Clinic. And so with that, I want to give so I want to make sure that this audio is working. So let me can you hear that?
Nope.
Okay, let me exit this in just a second and we will go. All right. So now let me present this. One moment, let me go back up here. And we will reopen it. So I'm going to add this right into the chat room, the link to the video. And so what I'd like for you to do is to
some suggestions. You may need to use your computer speakers and let the mic pick up from computer audio.
Yep. So let's do this. So just click on that link. It's a YouTube link. It's a 2-minute video. We'll give about 2 minutes for folks to watch that, and then we'll come back and have conversations. All right. So we'll set the timer now for 2 minutes. Click on that link in the chat room. Watch that video, and then we'll come back for some more conversations. So we'll come back at 2:27. All right. So it looks like people are done. So let's talk in the chat room just for a second. What were some of the challenges that you think were faced in that situation? Oh, no. First, let's back up. How realistic was that situation? So first, put that in the chat room. So how realistic was the situation presented in this scenario? Very realistic, happens a lot, very real, pretty real, very, yep. Scenario was realistic, a clash of different leadership styles, realistic, happens a lot. All right, cool.
Yeah.
So JP, help walk us through this scenario a little bit. What are some of the key things we should be thinking about as we look at or think about this particular scenario?
Yes. First of all, let everybody know that's the real case happened at the Mayo Clinic. Certainly, I changed the name and the department, whatever. However, I want people, first of all, people have pointed out what's the real root cause of this conflicts there. Can you write something in the chat room? What's the real root problem that causes this conflicts?
So gender is a conflict, okay. Lack of openness to communication, different leadership styles.
Really.
Supervisor couldn't give up control, a lack of trust, expectations of settings, power play, lack of inclusivity, expectations, unable to follow our 5 safe behaviors. Thank you. Who said that? I need to see who said that. You get extra bonus points.
Yes.
One way or the highway, right?
It's really the micromanagement style. People point out unable to follow 5 safety behaviors. Also, the big thing somebody pointed out, lack of trust.
Yep, right? and insecurity. So I would also, I mean, if I can just add a couple of things here too, right? So oftentimes there's more than one side to a story. And so it is important that we look at how to be effective versus just being right. So because I when I spend time with learners, part of their challenge is sometimes they are right, but they want to figure out how can they be effective, because sometimes they feel like the fate of their participation is deeply rooted in how that supervisor will grade them. So if the supervisor is doing something that's inappropriate or wrong, challenging them on that could be difficult, right? So there is this idea that you have to figure out how to be right versus effective. And in this role, I don't think I think we can argue where that effectiveness lies, or how effective people were on both sides, if you will, in getting their needs met. But we do want to talk about inclusive leaders. So go ahead, JP.
Okay, I'm done. Let's can we move on to the next? Yeah, this is the question we have discussed. Okay, we are running a little bit behind the time, so can we just can you move on to the next slides? I think you want to summarize the section, this introduction section. Actually, you talk about it. Okay, that's something we have mentioned. The definition of inclusive leaders at the Mayo Clinic, which we have covered. So go to the next one. Yes. So I'm going to request control. And okay, hold on. Okay. So I will start by, okay, it didn't go. Okay. I will start by talking about Well, inclusive leaders. Now let's look at those pictures. What does it tell us? Well, now we have 4 generations, right, working in the same space. We have veterans, baby boomers, we have Generation Xer, and we have millennials. Actually, we have Gen Z coming to the workplace already, right? They are actually doing intern. So in addition, look at the second picture. We have people with disability coming to work with more accommodation so that they can participate more. And we have veterans coming back to the workforce as well. So with all those, and that means we have a really diverse workforce. Now, we used to think about diverse workforce in terms of Black and white, men and women, but now we are talking about the global diversity workforce. So we can even think about just the males situation. I'm sure all of you are aware, recently we have the joint efforts with Abu Dhabi, right? To have this, the health clinical center in that region. But then you also probably have heard, we have a lot of international, Mayo Clinic have a lot of international presence, such as we call it international advisor services. We have like 40 joint ventures with different countries. And also we, Mayo Clinic sees over 1 million patients from over 140 countries. Okay, so those things make us, or particularly the leaders, to think about how should we lead today's diverse workforce and how to get the best out of them. Now, one thing, this is inclusive leadership, okay? That's the definition. Now, before we get into this part, I want to everybody start typing in the chat room. Say something about how would you define today's workforce? In other words, what is the typical feature, or what do the employee wants, and what are their expectations from the employer? Okay. So equitable treatment, okay. Respect, recognition, great. Recognition, open communication, okay. Okay. Now, to save time, I'm going to focus on, okay, great, transparency, okay. I'm going to focus on 5 features. A lot of them you have mentioned here. First of all is the fairness. They want a fair treatment. Treat them as who they are, regardless their different age, gender, race, and cultural or social status, right? And the second one is they want to take ownership. What does that mean? They want to do the job or complete the project or the work with minimum micromanagement. They want to take that responsibility, and they want that trust. And the third one is the we call the flexibility, right? This is really related to work-life balance, right? I think due to limitation of the time, I don't have time to share an example. Meaning in today's workforce, flexibility has become a talent management policy, which is not just an option. It is the way to attract people, attract talents, and also to keep them there. The third one, the fourth one I want to talk about is career development. They really want to have the opportunity to grow at the workplace, and then to have some impacts and influence to what they are doing or to that work environment. So all those features, did I mention for flexibility? Okay, all those features, all those unique needs of the employees has to put a lot of pressure to today's leader. You not only need to have a great leadership skill, you need also to have this inclusive mindset, which comes to this definition. What is the inclusive mindset? Collaborative thinking, open to ideas, and listening to those, which actually covers what we talk about today's employees' needs. Okay, I'm going to go to the next slides. Okay, the question for everybody is to ask is, okay, yeah, we know we need the inclusive mindset. Okay, how do we get there, right? I mean, certainly you have, a lot of you, by just reading your notes in the chat room, I know you already have a lot of ideas, you have stuff there. So what we are going to talk about, okay, I have to minimize my screen, couldn't see, okay. And you need those three things. One is to understand the big picture, or we call business context, and firmly believe everyone is unique. And the second is really you have vested interest in employee and also treat them with this empathy and sympathy. The third one is makes intentional efforts to develop people through work. Okay, I will go through a little bit of details about the first one, engage your mind. Well, people would ask me, okay, engage your mind, why do we need to understand those 4 global megatrends? Because those 4 global megatrends really are reshaping the business environment and the business priorities. And remember the famous saying nowadays, which is really popular, diversity is reality, inclusion is a choice, right? Then if you really want to make that choice, you need this knowledge to understand what is going on in today's business world. So those 4 major trends, start with diversity of markets. What I'm talking about, we know American population is growing very diverse, increasingly diverse, right? Now with that, a lot of the big businesses, not just a big business, is trying to develop or using alternative ways to creating advertising or communication to reach those new customers in different social, racial, race, and markets of different race, social groups. So give you some examples. For example, Targets. Targets has released some advertising depicting the African American families using their own values and ideals instead of adopting the stereotypical representation. Now, some car makers, big car makers like Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, they have developing advertising directed to LGBT groups. They are sponsor-related events and making advertising specific to that group. And also, you probably heard about Harley Davidson is releasing or creating advertising to women, creating some training program to teach women to write. So what I'm talking about here, so business are trying to say, okay, we know markets are diverse. We need to find ways to quickly to reach those customers in different diverse group. Now, the second one, diverse of customer needs. Now, empowered by technology and a lot of wide range of options, right? Through online sale, whatever. Today's customers' needs and expectations are changing. Right? So what they want is you need to make your products and services that are tailored to my needs. Well, now I'll give you an example. We heard about Nordstrom last October, opened a New York flagship store in Manhattan. The store occupies 7 floors and 320,000 square feet. Okay, well, it sells all type of commodities the traditional store offers, right? But it has more. That's that one. To start with, it has this complete new services. For instance, it offers online order 24/7 pickup service. It offers clothes alteration, shoe repairs, stroller cleaning, and appointments with personalized stylists. Now the second one, so when you are shopping there, you become hungry, right? Well, they have 7 places with a lot of different options, eatery places, but that's not it. Their customer service rep can deliver your meal to you directly while you are shopping. Another bright point. So they also adopted high-tech solution, such as called, it's a, okay, I'm losing my point here. It's, augmented reality. Sorry, augmented reality booth. So people can sample over 400 different shades of lipsticks without literally trying it on. How good, okay? So this type of tailored services really attract a lot of customers to its store, okay? Now, diversity of talents, what I'm talking, it's not surprising, not a lot of companies are fighting for different talents, try to attract them. So according to a study by the Society of Human Resources Management, they find out 57% of recruiters in the United States are trying to using blind hiring to attract people. Why are they doing that? We know the obvious facts. They try to overcome unconscious bias. Or sometimes they couldn't get the people they are looking for. What they do is they're using the HR tools like applicants tracking system. And they try to, access the internal talent pool, try to rediscover the talents people in different roles, right? So one thing I do want to mention about this diversity of talents, it's going to be really a very critical issue. Why is that? Because you probably have read or heard about the story. In many other countries, some big businesses are really couldn't find sufficient skilled workers. I give you a small example here. You know, last year, Germany's economic growth rate is only 0.6%. One of the big reasons for that is they don't have sufficient skilled workers. So the government is trying every way. They reach out to try to find skilled workers from other EU countries. They even go to Mexico and also some Asian countries to find people there. That's also related to the birth rate. Due to the time constraint, I'm not going to mention that. So how to hire proper talents, how to retain them is going to be an important thing, our issues.
And JP, you know, we also have to take into consideration this COVID-19, right? So even as we think about these market trends, and we think about the customer's needs, and we think about talents, and we think about this diversity of ideas, it is going to require us to think differently about even how we approach each one of those things. You know, business as normal is the new normal. I mean, looking at engaging our mind becomes an even more heightened skill when we start thinking about becoming actual in this new context, right? So all of those things are wonderful things to remember, simultaneously remembering that we have to engage our mind, our heart, and our desire to be collective, because everything in our environment is saying that might not necessarily, physical connectedness might not necessarily be what we're after, you know. Okay. So
very great, good idea. So the other part, the last one, this is diversity of ideas. What I'm talking about is really about innovation. So any company, any business or organization, if they are still focusing on the process that is designed to produce standard products or services, they can get into trouble. Some good example still in the retail. Okay, we used to have in Rochester, we used to have a Sears store, right? Not anymore. You know, Sears store has been closing their store locations. Now in the whole country, they have fewer than 200 stores. Now we used to have Shopko, Shopko North, right? Shopko North is closed. And that's also, they are struggling. They close almost 70% of their locations and trying to restructure to emerge from the bankruptcy. Okay, on the other end of the spectrum, Targets, I'm sure you probably go there often. Targets is really doing very well, at least before this corona, right? Okay, I haven't been there recently anyway. So they are increasing more stores and they are remodeling over 500, and their network now consisting of 1,800 stores with different sizes and formats, because their business model is really creative and innovative. They have special brands and they have unique design in the store. They are launching, they are launching over 20 private label lines. All they are doing is, you know what, they attract a lot of customers, a big traffic in their stores. Okay, so what I'm talking about here, the 4 mega trends, is to have everybody as leaders. We want to understand what is going on in the markets and in the business world, but also understand the real driver of all those values are our frontline employee, a diverse workforce. And then the question for us to think about is, how would we bring the best of all of them? Okay, so here, the second one I'm going to talk about briefly, I think our time is how to engage your heart. So my point here is, diversity really gave organizations and the business some competitive edge, right? But at the same time, you probably notice if you have people from different culture, when different cultural mix, sometimes employees and managers can get frustrated when communication becomes difficult, right? And also you notice different cultures, some cultures have are more or less deferential to authority. And some cultures have larger or smaller degree of autonomy in workplace. Why is that? We all understand there's a big difference. We call it Western culture and East culture, okay? So we know that the children in some like Eastern cultures, like Scandinavia, including United States, right? They were taught from young age, they should treat the person in charge as the facilitator among equals. Therefore, it is quite okay to challenge or even to disagree with the person in charge in the room, right? Well, on the other side, children from a lot of, we call Eastern culture, Asian countries like India, China, Japan, Korea, all of them. So they were taught from the young age that you should defer to the person in charge, meaning it's not appropriate to challenge them or to disagree with them, which actually leading to some different like perception, style, and behavior. I'm giving small examples here, 3 quickly. Now, the first one, this is something I read in the article. This is an American woman and a Chinese woman, both work for a French company called Hermes that's produce high-end products, right? So one day the two were talking about the company, and the Chinese woman made this comment. She says, you know what? Hermes is working at Hermes is really great because they treat everybody as equal. The CEO even treats the janitor the same way as he does with anyone else. Well, this American woman who has lived in France for 16 years and worked there many years, totally disagree. She was thinking, you know what? Okay, in comparison, French culture is much more hierarchy than that of United States. So in that sense, this American woman's perception about Hermes culture is quite right. However, that Chinese woman's perception is equally right. You know what? In Chinese workplace, in most places, I'm not about Chinese society, and that's a different story. When I have time, I can share a little bit more. But in Chinese workplace, the Chinese, the culture there's a much more hierarchical culture in Chinese workplace than that of American. So in that sense, this Chinese woman's perception is also right, but they're quite different too, right? Another example, talking about style. So even we talk about, let's say this example, even within the same country, working style is quite different. So example is how direct we are in giving negative feedback. And there's a study find out that people, they call the New Yorkers, are the most direct in giving feedback, whereas the people from the southern states are least direct. So there's this comment, they say, if a person from Georgia is managing, New Yorkers can experience very strong cultural shock, right? Also, I'm sure people in this who are attending the session, you might have people from different cultures. So at your team meeting, you might notice this behavior. Some culture ended up talking all the time at a meeting, and some culture do not participate as much. And it might be quite different reasons, right? They want to prepare their thoughts, they want to compare notes, they don't feel they are ready, whatever. So really, it's really challenging to managing diversity as well. That's the point. So the real solution here, I want to share the thoughts. This is from a Tibetan scholar also. He's the English interpreter for Dalai Lama. He says, leaders really need to manage people with compassionate approach, which consists of 3 aspects. The first one is the we call the cognitive aspect. I understand your problem. Now, affective aspect. I know how you feel. And we call it motivational aspect. I am going to help you out of the situation. That's the approach, okay? So that's what I'm talking about. Engage your mind, engage your heart. The last one, engage your hands. I guess we have 2 minutes to go. What we are going to do. So quickly, what I want to talk about is in 2 minutes. Engage your hands is really avoid using micromanagement, which actually we have in the chat room, people talk about that. Okay, give them a trust, really believing everybody has the skill and experiences to do their job well. And I like to borrow this someone mentioned this. This is, well, you as leaders, particularly frontline leaders, you need to recognize that your team can do a better job than you do because they have, or they spend 40 hours each week doing the job, which you don't, right? You have a lot of other stuff to handle. So give them trust, space, and help them to grow. So I'm going to, so what I'm going to end it here. We have 2 minutes left. We actually intend to, this is the quotation, surround yourself on, so you can read this there. We actually originally intended to talk about next one, which is the cultural competence and agility by Andrew. Andrew, what we are going to do, we are running really behind the time.
Yeah, that's okay. So what I'd like to do is there's another session, and I'm actually trying to chat in the chat room as we're speaking. For those people who want to stick on a little bit longer and have questions about things, we can entertain those. There is a second session that's coming up that's also in My Learning. That is the follow-up to this session. We're taking a 2-hour session and really breaking it into, actually we're taking a 4-hour session, breaking it into 2 hours, and then breaking those 2 hours into these 2 sections. But I did want to just address one of the questions that was in the chat room, which was, as a leader, how do I do this individual accountability when I have lots of people, right? So it sounds like we're talking about that. What I would encourage is that we're not necessarily talking about creating individual environments, but maximizing the individuals in the environments that we're working in, right? So ultimately, the needs of the patient come first. And so when we talk about getting people's skills, getting people's input, it is all what we're trying to drive at is how do we maximize all that individuality so that the needs of the patient come first in everything that we do. And so if we're not achieving goals, it's not helpful to just talk about people's feelings, right? Or just be mindful of those things. But if we're able to be mindful of people's feelings and be able to engage them, we are actually able to drive collectively the group of people to a common goal. So another way to think about that is you are a winner if you are at 51%. Right? So in our democracy, 51% wins. However, if you have 49% that are disgruntled, you still have a problem that you have to manage, right? So again, and that's where leadership comes in. Leadership figures out, all right, we have this 51% and we're winning, we won, but we have this 49% that's disgruntled. Leadership, inclusive leadership, comes in and says, how do I bring those 49 along with me? So it's not just about the individual plan, and it's not just about the individual, it is about the collective goal of the organization that we're running. And so leadership says, how do I continue with these 51 and bring these 49 along? So that's the last piece that I'll give. Yeah. So cool. Yeah. So the people are adding, like the light bulb becomes brighter when you add more people to it. Right. So let me see. Yeah. So, so there are a couple of folks that I'm going to talk offline with. But for the rest of you, I want to say thank you so much for your time. We look forward to gathering together for our next pieces. And let's keep talking. I'm really enjoying this. And please give in the chat room, if you enjoyed the session, give us, say yes. If there are some challenges or things that you want to have more conversations about, put that in the chat room as well. All right. And with that, JP, any last words?
Yeah, I want to say, everybody, I'm going to send you another email to remind you that for next Thursday with the link so you can just, there's a possibility that I send it to you through like a meeting invite or whatever. I'm going to do that. Make sure to remind you one day before the session. Okay, that's all I need to do.
Wonderful. So until next time, I'm Andre Cohen, and this is JP Fahn, and we enjoy being with you. So
yeah, thanks for everybody's attention, and thanks very much for your time. All right. We'll see you next week.
This has been another episode of Speaking of Diversity and Inclusion at Mayo Clinic. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We hope that the principles and conversations that we had today you will find helpful as we make the needs of the patient come first a reality. And so as we continue our day, we want to just say thank you so much again, and we look forward to seeing who you become as you continue your conversations about diversity and inclusion here at Mayo Clinic. I'm Andre Cohen. Have a great day.